my living room, my couch. My throw blanket folded exactly the way I always fold it, corner tucked under, the cream side facing up, and my husband's sister sitting on it like she lived there. I stood in the doorway with my carry-on still in my hand and my coat half off my shoulder, and I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just stood there looking at the two of them. Kevin on the end of the couch closest to the window, the one he always said hurt his back, and Faye sitting close enough that their knees were almost touching, a glass of my good wine in her hand, laughing at something he'd just said. They hadn't heard me come in yet. The flight from Phoenix had landed 40 minutes early. I'd texted Kevin from the gate, but he hadn't responded. I figured he was asleep. He'd been staying up late that week, said it was a work thing, said he'd explain when I got back. I didn't push. I never pushed. That's the part I keep coming back to. I'd been Kevin's wife for 6 years by then. We met at a rooftop fundraiser in Atlanta. He was there for work. I was there with a friend who'd dragged Dazim out of the house after a particularly bad month. He found me standing alone near the bar, nursing a sparkling water, watching the city lights blink on below us. He said, "You look like someone who came here by accident." I said, "You're not wrong." That was it. That was how it started. We got married 3 years later in a small ceremony in Savannah. His family drove up from Tallahassee. His mother Claudette, his younger brother Marcus. No, wait, not Marcus. The brother's name was Derek and his girlfriend at the time, and then Faye. Faye, who was 8 years younger than Kevin, who'd just finished her 2nd year of dental hygiene school, who cried during my vows and hugged me after and said, "I always wanted a big sister." I believed her. For years I believed her. She moved to Atlanta 14 months ago. Said she needed a fresh start after a bad breakup. Said Atlanta made sense because we were here, because family was here. Kevin helped her find an apartment over in Buckhead. A 1-bedroom, nothing fancy, but close enough that she could come over on Sundays for dinner, which she did, almost every week. I cooked. She brought wine. We watched old episodes of reality shows. Neither of us would admit we liked. And she'd fall asleep on the couch sometimes, and I'd put the blanket over her and feel like I'd done something right. That's what I mean when I say I believed her. I'd been in Phoenix for a conference. 4 days, the kind of trip that sounds more interesting than it is. I work in corporate compliance for a mid-sized logistics company. The conference was in a hotel ballroom with bad overhead lighting and salmon that had no business being served at that temperature. I was ready to come home by day 2. My return flight was supposed to land Thursday evening. A seat opened up on an earlier connection out of Phoenix, and I grabbed it without thinking. I texted Kevin from the gate, landing early, home by 2, and then I put my phone in my bag and got on the plane. He hadn't responded by the time I landed. I still wasn't worried. That's the thing. I got my bag, I called a rideshare, I rode home through the kind of gray February afternoon that makes Atlanta look like a different city. I tipped the driver and wheeled my bag up the front walk and let myself in through the side door that connects to the kitchen the way I always do. And then I walked through the kitchen and into the living room, and there was Faye. She saw me first. Her face went, I don't know how to describe it. Not guilty, exactly. Something closer to caught. Her eyes went wide and she sat up straighter and she said, "Oh," like I was the one who'd walked into the wrong house. Kevin turned around a half-second later. He stood up fast. Too fast. The kind of fast that tells you everything before the words do. "Hey," he said. "Hey, I thought you weren't landing until tonight." "Flight changed," I said. The room went quiet. Not a comfortable quiet. The kind that has weight to it, the kind you can feel pressing on your chest. I looked at Faye. She had set her wine glass down on my coffee table, on the wood, not on the coaster 6 inches to the left of it, and she was looking at her hands. I looked at Kevin. "How long has she been here?" I asked. "We were just catching up," he said. I nodded slowly. I looked around the room. Her jacket was on the hook by the door, the hook I use for my things. Her shoes were by the baseboard heater. There was a second wine glass on the kitchen counter that I hadn't noticed when I came through, and next to it, a plate with the remnants of the good cheese I'd bought at the Whole Foods on Ponce the week before I left. I'd been saving it. I'd thought about it on the plane, actually, the sharp white cheddar and the fig jam and maybe some crackers as a little treat for when I got home. I said, "How long?" looked at Faye. Faye looked at Kevin. That was my answer. I didn't yell. I want to be clear about that. I've thought a lot about that moment in the months since, about whether I should have yelled, whether staying calm was a kind of dignity or a kind of shutdown, and I still don't know. What I know is that I sat down in the armchair across from them, the green one by the window that I reupholstered myself 2 summers ago, and I set my bag down at my feet, and I said, "I need you to tell me the truth, right now. All of it." Kevin sat back down on the couch. Faye stayed very still. He started talking. It had been going on for 8 months. 8 months of dinners she supposedly came to for my sake. 8 months of Sunday evenings I thought we were all building something together. He said it started when he helped her move into her Buckhead apartment. Said it just happened, which is the thing people say when they want you to believe they had no agency, no choices, that events simply occurred around them like weather. He said he was sorry. He said it multiple times, the way people do when they're hoping repetition will do the work that sincerity can't. Faye said almost nothing. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and looked at a spot somewhere near the corner of the room. I looked at her directly and said, "Faye." She looked up. "You told me you wanted a big sister," I said. She opened her mouth, closed it. Her eyes filled up and I watched her decide whether she was going to cry, and I think she decided against it because she could see from my face that it wasn't going to help her. "I'm sorry, Petra," she said. And there it was. My name, in her mouth, like we were still the same people we'd been on those Sunday evenings. Like she could say my name and have it mean the same thing it used to. Here's what I didn't know yet. I found out in pieces over the following days, some of it from Kevin, some of it from things I found when I started looking, which I hadn't done before because I hadn't thought I needed to. We had a joint account for household expenses. I'd been putting in my half every month, same as always, $1,500 to cover utilities, groceries, the mortgage contribution. Kevin put in his half too, or I thought he did. What I found when I actually looked at the account was that his deposits had been irregular for almost a year. Some months, full amount. Other months, 200 short, 300 short. 1 month 500 short, with a withdrawal the same week to an account I didn't recognize. I called my bank. I asked questions. The account the withdrawals went to was a personal account in Kevin's name alone. I couldn't see what the money had been spent on. I didn't have access to that account, didn't even know it existed. But I knew the math. Over 11 months, by my rough count, somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000 had left our joint account in a direction I hadn't approved and hadn't been told about. I hired a CPA I trusted to help me document it cleanly. She laid it out in a spreadsheet. Column A, expected deposits. Column B, actual deposits. Column C, the difference, $4,300 and change. I printed that spreadsheet, and I put it in a folder. I also called my sister-in-law's landlord, not to cause trouble, but because Faye had mentioned once, months ago, that Kevin had co-signed her lease. I'd nodded at the time and filed it away, and not thought much about it. I thought about it now. I called and confirmed, yes, Kevin was on that lease. Yes, that lease was coming up for renewal. Yes, there was a current balance. I put that in the folder too. I gave Kevin 3 days. I don't entirely know why 3 days. It felt like a number that was long enough for me to be sure of myself, and short enough that I wasn't letting things fester. During those 3 days, I slept in the guest room. I went to work. I ate lunch at my desk, and I came home and I was civil, the way you are when you're still gathering what you need. He tried to talk to me twice. The first time I said, "Not yet." The second time I said, "Soon." He nodded and went back to whatever he was pretending to do. On the third day, I sat down with him at the kitchen table, no laptops, no phones, no distractions, and I laid out the folder. I said, "I want to talk about the joint account." He went very still. I walked him through the spreadsheet, page by page. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The numbers did it for me. He tried, at first, to say it was a timing thing. Deposits that hadn't cleared, months where he'd been short on cash and intended to make it up. I let him finish. Then, I turned to the page where I'd highlighted the transfer dates next to the withdrawal dates, and I put my finger on the column and I waited. He stopped talking. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said. "I'm telling you what I know, so that we're having a conversation about what's real." He looked at the table. "The lease," I said, and I turned to the next page. He looked up then. "I know you co-signed it," I said. "And I know you've been covering more than your share of it, which means some of what's been leaving our account has been going toward an apartment for the woman you've been seeing for 8 months. He didn't deny it. "I want it back," I said. "All of it. I've had it documented. You can write me a check, or we can involve attorneys, and I would genuinely rather not involve attorneys, but I will if that's what this becomes." He said he'd write the check. I said, "I also want you to understand that I'm not staying in this marriage. I want you to understand that clearly, so that we can handle what comes next with as little damage as possible." He looked at me for a long moment. I think he'd been hoping, even then, even sitting there with the spreadsheet in front of him, that there was some version of this where I didn't leave. I could see it in his face. "The calculation," I said, "Kevin, I know." And whatever he'd been holding on to, he let go of it then. The hardest part wasn't the conversation with Kevin. The hardest part was his mother. Claudette called me on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after I'd asked Kevin to leave. He was staying with Derek in Decatur. I'd changed the locks, not out of anger, but out of practicality. I needed the house to be mine in a clear and uncomplicated way while I figured out what came next. Claudette called, and I almost didn't answer. We had always gotten along. She was a warm woman, the kind who sent birthday cards on the actual birthday and remembered how you took your coffee. She'd called me her daughter-in-law, with a particular emphasis on the daughter, and I'd felt that. I'd let myself feel that. I answered. She was quiet for a moment after I said hello. Then she said, "Petra, I don't even know what to say to you." I said, "You don't have to say anything, Claudette." "I raised him better than this," she said. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the effort it took to keep it that way. "I want you to know that. I don't know what happened to him, but I raised him better. I told her I believed her. I did believe her. She asked if I was okay. I said I was getting there. She said, 'You take care of yourself first, you hear me? You take care of yourself first.' I said I would. I don't know if I cried after I hung up, or if I just sat there. I think I just sat there. The kitchen was very quiet, and the February light was coming through the window over the sink, and I could hear a bird somewhere outside. And I thought, this is what the next part sounds like. Quiet, a little cold, something small still singing. Faye tried to reach me twice. Once by text, a long message that I read and didn't respond to, because there wasn't anything in it that I needed to answer. She said she was sorry. She said she never meant for it to happen. She said she hoped someday I'd be able to forgive her. I read the whole thing, and I held my phone, and I thought about the Sunday evenings. The wine she brought. The way she fell asleep on my couch. The second time she showed up at the house. I saw her car in the driveway from the upstairs window, and I stood there for a moment, and then I went downstairs and I opened the door. She looked like she hadn't slept in a while. "I just wanted to see you," she said. "I just wanted to say it to your face." I stood in the doorway and I looked at her. "I heard you," I said. "I read what you sent." "I know," she said. "I just—" "Faye." I said her name the way she'd said mine, back in the living room that first night. Quiet. Direct. I'm not ready for this conversation, and I'm not sure I ever will be. But what I can tell you right now is that I'm okay, and you don't have to worry about me. She nodded. Her eyes were wet. I said, "Take care of yourself," and I closed the door. The divorce was finalized 7 months later. Georgia is a no-fault state, and we didn't fight about much. He kept his car, I kept the house, we split the remaining joint accounts evenly, and he repaid the $4,300 separately as agreed by certified check. My attorney cost me $2,000 and was worth every cent. She had a way of explaining things that made the whole process feel manageable, like paperwork, like a thing that could be gotten through. I had a small circle of people who knew what happened. My friend Rochelle, not the Rochelle from any story you've heard before, just Rochelle, who I've known since college, and who drove over the night, I found out, and sat with me until almost 1 a.m. doing absolutely nothing useful, and therefore everything necessary. My coworker Diane, who noticed I seemed off and asked once, carefully, and then let me decide how much to say. And my mother, who lives outside Nashville now, who drove down the weekend after I asked Caven to leave and cooked enough food to last me 2 weeks and did not once say, "I told you so," even though she had, years ago, said something quieter and more general about what it meant to marry into a family you didn't know well enough. She didn't say it. She just cooked. That's who my mother is. I'm writing this from my kitchen. Same house. Same window over the sink. I had it repainted last spring. The walls are a warm terracotta now, a color I picked out of a magazine and second-guessed for 3 weeks, and then looked at when it was done and thought, yes, this is what I meant. There are things I've gotten better at since then. I look at bank statements now the way I probably should have been looking at them all along. I ask questions when something doesn't add up, instead of filing it away for later. I know what's in my accounts, what's coming in, what's going out, not because I'm afraid, or not only because of that, but because it turned out that paying attention is its own kind of peace. I've also gotten better at the Sunday evenings. I still have them, just differently. Sometimes it's Rochelle coming over, or Diane, or my neighbor Bernice, who lives 2 doors down and is 71 years old and has the driest sense of humor I have ever encountered in a human being. We eat whatever I feel like making. We watch whatever anyone wants to watch. Nobody falls asleep on my couch without being there for the right reasons. The bird I heard that February morning, the one singing in the cold. I don't know what kind it was. I still don't. But it was there, and the kitchen was quiet, and the light was coming through the window, and something in me that had been wound very tight for a very long time had just let go. That's the part I want to hold on to, not the betrayal, not the spreadsheet, not the certified check, not the sound of the door clicking shut behind her. Not even the quiet satisfaction of having handled something badly broken with something close to grace. Just that bird. Just that window. Just the sense, in the middle of a very cold and ordinary morning, that the next part of my life was already there, waiting, small and unhurried, starting exactly where I was standing.